She stepped into the gleaming private hospital, wearing nothing but a simple cotton blouse and worn-out flats, and became a target. The wealthy mothers sneered, asking if she worked in housekeeping. Nurses brushed her aside, pushing her out of the VIP lounge. Laughter echoed as they reduced her to nothing, but they didn't know who she really was. Minutes later, the doors flew open. Her husband, the billionaire who had just bought the entire hospital, walked in. Their arrogance turned to terror. The same mouths that mocked her now struggled to apologize, but it was far too late. The double doors hissed shut behind her with a soft click. Clara Monroe paused at the threshold of Silvercrest Medical Pavilion, clutching the strap of her canvas tote. The polished marble floor reflected crystal chandeliers overhead, casting cold, perfect patterns on her faded flats. Everything about the hospital screamed privilege. The walls, pearl white and silent. The reception desk manned by attendants in tailored uniforms. The waiting lounge, a sea of designer handbags, diamond-studded wrists and cold, sharp eyes. And Clara, in her soft cotton blouse and simple gray trousers, was the flaw in the masterpiece. The first cut came fast. A woman seated by the window, face hidden behind oversized sunglasses, let her voice rise just enough for the room to hear. "Excuse me. Is housekeeping supposed to use the front entrance now?" Laughter rippled through the lounge, subtle, sharp, deadly. Clara kept walking, ignoring the comment. She was used to blending in. She preferred it, but the room wouldn't let her. A second voice, this time sweeter but dripping with venom. Madison Linville, wife of a biotech CEO, flipped her platinum hair and whispered loudly to her friend, eyes never leaving Clara's shoes. Worn-out flats at Silvercrest, bold. "Or broke." Her friend snickered behind manicured nails. "Maybe both." Clara exhaled slowly. She tightened her hold on the tote. Her mother-in-law, Eleanor, was upstairs after a sudden fainting spell. That was why she was here, not for them. Not for this, but cruelty rarely stopped at whispers. "Excuse me, ma'am," a nurse interrupted, stepping directly into Clara's path. She was young, pretty, her bun severe. Her name tag read Carla. "This area is reserved for family members only," she said, her tone practiced. Her eyes flicked over Clara's simple outfit, unimpressed. Staff should wait in the service hallway. Clara blinked. "I'm family. My mother-in-law is Eleanor Monroe, admitted 20 minutes ago." The nurse's eyes narrowed slightly, skepticism overt. "Eleanor Monroe," she glanced back toward the reception desk, then her lips curved, faintly mocking. "Of course. Right this way." But she didn't lead Clara toward the lounge. Instead, she guided her across the hall, toward the far corner where a small, cramped alcove sat empty. "Please wait here," Carla said sweetly. "We'll call you when you're needed." No offer of water, no polite small talk, just dismissal wrapped in faux politeness. As Clara sat down in the cold, hard chair, the whispers began again, emboldened now that she was officially cast aside. "She says she's family. Probably married into it, temporary. Or pretending. These hospitals get all sorts nowadays." Clara's phone buzzed. A text from her husband, Alexander, landing in 15 minutes. "Stay calm, I'll be there soon." She stared at the words for a long moment, the weight of them grounding her. But outside her small bubble, the cruelty escalated. A woman in a crimson St. Laurent dress approached with theatrical sympathy. "Are you with catering?" she asked, gesturing at Clara's tote bag. Before Clara could respond, another woman laughed. "No, she's probably here to clean the floors." The words were knives. But Clara only crossed her legs slowly, staring at the polished tips of her faded flats. Her silence, her refusal to break, only seemed to fuel their glee. Phones discreetly rose, pictures snapped, whispers became posts. "Silvercrest standards. Wrong room. Luxury vs reality." By the time the clock hit noon, Clara was no longer just invisible. She was the joke, and still she said nothing. Still she waited. Because Clara knew something they didn't. The clock was still ticking, and in exactly 3 minutes the doors would open, and their world would end. Minutes dragged, and so did the insults. The lounge became hungrier the longer Clara stayed silent. She was too easy of a target, too still, too unwilling to fight back. To them, that was weakness, and weakness in this world was sport. Savannah Vale, socialite and self-proclaimed queen of the Silvercrest wives, had grown bored with whispering. She stood, heels clicking sharply across the marble floor, and approached Clara like a lion circling a deer. "Sweetheart," Savannah began, her voice drenched in fake concern. Her diamond necklace caught the chandelier light, throwing daggers across the room. You really shouldn't sit there. That's for families, not guests. Clara looked up calmly, her emerald eyes steady. I am family. A few snickers rose immediately. Family, Savannah repeated, turning to face the growing audience. Of course. And my dog owns Microsoft. Laughter burst like fireworks, loud, cruel, contagious. Madison joined in, not missing her chance to stab deeper. Oh, leave her alone, Savannah. Maybe she married in. Happens all the time. You know, rich old guy, young wife, discount wardrobe. The crowd howled, faces twisted in gleeful malice. Clara said nothing. Her fingers tightened slightly on the strap of her tote bag, but her expression remained impassive. Her silence wasn't weakness, but they couldn't understand that. Another woman chimed in from the bar. Diana Crane, sipping a cucumber martini, leaned back lazily. She's too classy for catering. Maybe she's housekeeping. Here to make sure the floor stays clean for us. No way, Madison quipped, scrolling through her phone. Housekeeping wears uniforms. She's what, an intern? Volunteer, Savannah corrected with a wicked grin. Those shoes scream volunteer work. Phones were out again. Cameras hidden behind designer clutches captured every second. Harbor trash. Wrong lobby. Not tower level. Posts flooded private group, chats in real time. Silvercrest Royals, Billionaire Wives Circle, each caption crueler than the last, each emoji sharpening the blade. As if mocking her wasn't enough, Savannah stepped closer, so close Clara could smell the artificial sweetness of her perfume. Really, darling, she whispered loud enough for all to hear. Why don't you just wait outside? This place isn't exactly comfortable for people like you. Clara met her gaze, calm, unshaken. But before she could respond, an even colder voice cut through the air. Excuse me, ma'am. The head of reception himself, a man named Peter Lang, had approached, clipboard in hand. His tailored suit and sharp jawline radiated authority. He didn't bother hiding his disdain. We've received some concerns, he said smoothly, eyes raking across Clara's plain attire. I'm going to kindly ask you to vacate this area and wait in the first-floor lobby. The humiliation was surgical. They weren't pushing her away with jokes anymore. This was policy. Savannah practically beamed. Madison clapped slowly, mockingly. Clara stayed silent, but inside something twisted. Not anger, not yet, just disappointment. She rose slowly, smoothing out the wrinkles of her cotton blouse. Her tote shifted softly against her hip as she turned to face them all. The entire room was watching, phones still up, smiles still smug, and Clara, in the softest, steadiest voice imaginable, said only this. Are you sure you want to do that? A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Savannah blinked. What's that supposed to mean? But before Clara could answer, the soft chime of the entrance doors sliced through the tension. Heads turned. Smirks faded. The lounge fell into a heavy, expectant silence. Because walking through those doors, sharp suit immaculate, presence lethal, was Alexander Monroe himself, and he wasn't smiling. Silence, a kind no voice dared disturb. Alexander Monroe's entrance carved through the luxurious air like a blade through silk. Tall, composed, sharp as obsidian. His suit, charcoal with subtle pinstripes, clung perfectly to his broad shoulders. His watch, platinum Patek Philippe, gleamed faintly, though it might as well have been a sword, but it was his eyes that changed everything. Cold, focused, calculated, the eyes of a man who built empires before turning 35. The room, just seconds ago alive with venom and vanity, crumbled into wide-eyed paralysis. Savannah's hand, midair in an exaggerated gesture of mockery, fell limp. Madison's phone slipped slightly in her palm. Peter Lang, the head of reception, froze, clipboard suddenly feeling useless in his grasp. Everyone knew who he was. Alexander Monroe didn't merely visit Silvercrest. He owned Silvercrest, or so the whispers always said. His company, Monroe Medical Ventures, had been rumored to be in negotiations for months. Rumors, they thought, until now. He strode across the lounge with slow, purposeful steps, not hurrying, not needing to. Power never rushes. It simply arrives. Clara stood still, untouched by the sudden shift. Her expression remained serene, but her eyes, emerald and fierce, gleamed now with something new. Recognition, relief, and just a touch of restrained satisfaction. Alexander stopped directly beside her. His hand rested lightly, protectively at the small of her back, a gesture that sent shockwaves through the watching vultures. Sorry I'm late, he said softly, his voice reserved only for Clara. Traffic. Clara smiled faintly. You're right on time. Only then did Alexander lift his eyes to the room. and what the room saw in that gaze made their blood run cold. No anger, no theatrics, just ice. "Which one of you," he asked quietly, his voice deceptively calm, "decided my wife should wait in the lobby?" No one answered. How could they? The room became a canvas of frozen expressions. Peter Lang swallowed first. "Sir, there was some confusion. Of course, if we had known." Alexander's gaze silenced him instantly. "Confusion," he repeated, voice cutting. "You mean when my wife, the legal co-owner of this entire hospital, was humiliated in front of your staff and clients?" Savannah paled so fast her blush seemed painted on. "Wife?" she echoed weakly. "Yes," Alexander confirmed, his tone sharp enough to shatter glass. "Clara Monroe, my wife, and starting this morning at 9 a.m., co-chair of Silvercrest Holdings after I finalized our acquisition deal." A collective gasp rippled through the air. This wasn't a rumor, this wasn't temporary. Clara wasn't a visitor. She wasn't married in trash. She was the owner. Madison fumbled her phone, trying to discreetly close the mocking post she had typed only minutes ago. Too late. Alexander continued, voice soft but deadly precise. "I will be speaking with the board later today about staff and guests who participated in public humiliation and discrimination." He didn't shout, he didn't nod too. Each word landed like iron dropped from great height. "Until further notice," he added, glancing briefly at Peter Lang, "all those involved are suspended from entering any Silvercrest property, staff or otherwise." Savannah's lips parted, desperate to salvage herself. "But Mr. Monroe, this is all a misunderstanding. We didn't know." Alexander's cold stare pinned her instantly. "Exactly," he said, his tone sharp as a verdict. "You didn't know, you didn't even ask. And that," he finished, his voice dropping lower, "says everything about you." No one argued, because power had entered the room. And power had chosen sides. Silence pressed down like a heavy curtain. The same voices that had filled the lounge with taunts now refused to make a sound. Alexander Monroe's words hung in the air, sharp and immovable, a judgment already passed. Savannah, once the queen bee of Silvercrest, was the first to crack. Her lips trembled as she stepped forward, her designer heels suddenly unsure on the marble. "Mr. Monroe," she began, her voice dripping with a desperation poorly disguised as charm, "we had no idea. Clara didn't exactly introduce herself properly, and—" "Stop," Alexander cut in, his voice low and dangerous. Savannah froze mid-sentence, like a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar. "This isn't about introductions," he said sharply. "It's about basic human decency." He turned slightly, his eyes sweeping the room. "Not a single one of you thought to ask who she was," he continued, voice growing colder with each word. "You saw someone who didn't fit your mold and decided that made her lesser. You judged, you mocked, you humiliated." The words carved deep. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim under the weight of the shame flooding the lounge. Alexander's assistant, a young man in a navy suit, entered quietly from behind, holding a sleek tablet. Alexander nodded. "Show them." The assistant tapped the screen. Behind them, the giant TV mounted on the lounge wall flickered to life, casting harsh, unforgiving light on the gathering. Images flashed, screenshots, social media posts, videos, all from just 30 minutes earlier. All of them. Savannah's sneering face, frozen mid-mockery. Madison's caption, "Hope she cleans the floor before she leaves." Diana laughing, pointing directly at Clara's worn flats. Each frame was time-stamped, irrefutable. Gasps rippled through the room as realization dawned. Their cruelty had been recorded, their words immortalized. Alexander's voice cut through the tension. "This," he said, gesturing at the screen, "is who you chose to be when no one was watching." "But sir," Madison tried, but the steel in Alexander's glare silenced her instantly. No excuses," he snapped. "Silvercrest will not tolerate this behavior, not in its staff, not in its patrons, and certainly not in those who represent its values." Turning to Peter Lang, the reception head who had so gleefully ordered Clara out earlier, Alexander's words were ice. "You're fired, effective immediately." Peter's face blanched. "Mr. Monroe, please." Alexander didn't even look at him again. A simple gesture to his assistant, and security quietly stepped forward. Escort him out." The room fell into chaos, but quiet chaos. No one dared raise their voice now. Alexander turned toward Savannah next, his expression utterly void of sympathy. "Your membership and that of everyone on this video mocking my wife is revoked indefinitely. Your families are no longer welcome in any Monroe property, medical or otherwise. Savannah paled, her status crumbling before her very eyes. But our husbands, they're free to apply again, Alexander replied coolly, assuming they want to be associated with people who bully strangers in hospital waiting rooms. Savannah's shoulders slumped, her power bleeding away like water slipping down a drain. Alexander faced the crowd one last time. This isn't about wealth, he said, voice ringing with finality. It's about humanity, something you've all shown you know very little about. And with that, he turned, offering Clara his hand. Clara, who had remained poised and silent through it all, accepted without hesitation. Together, they left the stunned, shattered lounge behind, husband and wife, simple and extraordinary, untouchable in their quiet dignity. Behind them, the whispers began to rise, but they were whispers of panic now, of fear, of reputations destroyed, and for the first time since Clara arrived that morning, not a single person dared to laugh. By the next morning, Silvercrest wasn't just a private hospital anymore. It was a headline, a cautionary tale. Billionaire's wife humiliated by elites, entire hospital staff and patrons exposed. Silvercrest scandal. Cruelty caught on camera. Hospital of the privileged until power walked in. The footage Alexander ordered displayed on the lounge screen had leaked. Not by him, not by Clara, but by someone unseen, one of the junior staff, disgusted by what they'd witnessed. Within hours, clips flooded social media. Savannah's cruel smirk, Madison's pointed finger, Peter Lang's dismissive wave, all frozen forever. The internet tore them apart, comments piled high like a digital avalanche. Disgusting. Monsters in designer shoes. Clara is more noble in one toe than that whole room combined. Silvercrest's board, terrified of losing the Monroe account and the $800 million medical endowment that came with it, moved fast. Peter Lang fired, the entire guest list from the lounge that day, memberships revoked. Savannah and Madison's husbands, major tech CEOs, forced to issue public apologies as stocks began to dip. By noon, every woman who had laughed at Clara was trending for the wrong reasons. The fall of the yacht wives. From pearls to pariahs. Savannah's social empire collapsed overnight. Madison's husband announced their divorce in a crisp statement, distancing himself from the scandal. Diana Crane, a video of her tearfully trying to enter another exclusive club and being politely turned away, went viral. The once invincible queens of Silvercrest became outcasts. The same doors they slammed on Clara, now slammed on them, and Clara, she stayed silent, gracefully silent, painfully silent. It was the kind of silence that echoed louder than 1,000 apologies. She spent the following week quietly returning to her simple routine, morning yoga, afternoons in her art studio. Evenings spent cooking alongside Alexander in their warm, sunlit kitchen overlooking the bay. To her, the storm had passed. She wasn't angry. She didn't need revenge. But the world still wasn't done watching her. On the third day, Silvercrest Hospital's new chairman, appointed directly by Alexander, made a public statement. Effective immediately, the entire hospital's branding, policies, and leadership would undergo massive reform. No patient, no guest, no human, the chairman said, will ever be judged by their attire or wealth again. Clara Monroe's name will stand for something here, for fairness, for dignity. They unveiled the new wing in her honor. The Clara Monroe Center for Compassionate Care, a towering, sleek addition to the hospital, built using funds redirected from Silvercrest's now-defunct luxury lounge budget. In the dedication ceremony, Clara stood in front of flashing cameras for the first time since the incident, wearing the same cotton blouse, the same soft flats. When asked by a reporter why she hadn't chosen something grander for the occasion, Clara smiled softly. "Because this," she said, lifting her wrist to reveal her plain wedding band, "is enough." Her words spread everywhere. Because this is enough. In homes, on talk shows, printed across glossy magazine covers, no viral hashtag this time. Just a quiet revolution. Savannah, Madison, Diana, their names faded fast, their luxury lives reduced to reminders of how fast power built on cruelty crumbles. But Clara, her legacy endured, not as the billionaire's wife. Not as the poor woman mocked in a hospital lounge, but as a reminder, a symbol. That grace, the silent, unbreakable kind, always wins in the end.